Lawson with Seed Invest. Seed Invest is an early stage online fundraising platform. We've been around since 2012. Our founders helped put the Jobs Act together, so we're well schooled in the regulations. And today we have about 350,000 investors using our platform. We've raised money for about 200 companies. We've raised about 200 million to date. We do that through Regulation A+, which is where my specialty lies, as well as Regulation CF and Regulation D. Really exciting time for the online capital markets. I'm sure we'll have a chance to talk about it later. But again, thanks very much for having me.
Jason?
I think Jason.
Yeah. Jason's muted. So Sydney, you don't need to mute us. We'll handle it.
Okay.
Okay. Can you guys hear me?
No, I didn't mute anybody.
Yep.
Just you guys.
Go ahead, Jason.
Perfect. Sydney, thanks for having us on here. Gene, excited to be on another panel with you here. Sam, thanks for that introduction. Again, this is a high caliber video presentation to be a part of. So honor to be here with you gentlemen, particularly during these times. Equity crowdfunding, we are excited to see is still moving. So happy to share insights of the campaigns we're running, recommendations for anyone on the line here that's directly involved with the project. I'm Jason Fishman. I'm calling in from LA here as well today too. And I run a marketing agency out of Playa Vista called DNA, Digital Niche Agency. We've been in business since 2014, first working on Reg D offerings to accredited investors, later the Reg CF and Reg A's once the filings opened up for the unaccredited audiences. We built data to reach historical equity crowdfunding investors, have worked on over 350 campaigns to date, done 9 figures of funding, and again, just excited to be here with everyone today and provide some thought leadership.
Now, Sydney, Marc Deschenaux has just logged in from Geneva, and can you unmute him?
Well, he needs to unmute himself. I mean, I just asked him to do that, but I'll try to. I don't see him here, but I'm doing it with him.
I think he just unmuted himself.
Oh yeah,
Marc,
welcome, yes.
Can you do an introduction on yourself so I don't mess it up?
No problem. So I'm very happy to be with you all, gentlemen. I'm Marc Deschenaux. I'm 56 years old. I'm basically have a triple background. First as a electronic and data processing engineer from Caltech, then as a trader in securities and commodities, and finally as a securities lawyer. And basically I've been involved in 179 IPO total. And I'm currently organizing one of the largest IPO ever made, which will be a charity IPO.
That's great. That's great. Gentlemen, today we're going to be talking about how to get funding in the time of coronavirus, which is a topic of great interest to everyone now. So why don't we start with Sam? Because Sam, you have a great portal. And let's see, do I need to click on Sam to make him come on the screen here? Because I'm still looking at Marc.
I think I'm here. Yeah. I think you can hear me, right?
Yes, we hear you. Yes. Okay. Sam, people now some of my clients have said, "Oh, we'll just wait until this is over." But from what the research that I've done, crowdfunding has not dropped off the end of the world here. Actually, it's in some instances, it's as vibrant as it ever was. Can you give us kind of a take on what crowdfunding is doing right now in the middle of this?
Yeah, sure. It's a good point you raised. Just before I kind of go into what's going on in the early stage capital markets, just to underline your point, at Seed Invest, we saw the best month we've seen in many, many months this March in terms of investor volume, new investors, and so on. This week is trending to be one of the best weeks we've had in a long time as well. So
let me interrupt you. Let me interrupt you and see if you can tell me why that is happening.
That's a good question. There's a lot of potential reasons there. I think I don't want to give anyone reason, because I think we're still doing the analysis. My guess would be it's partly to do with the fact that more people are at home on their screens looking for opportunities to invest. We at Seed Invest try to source thematically and think carefully about the companies that we're raising for to match the market. And so I think that we've hopefully done a good job of that. I think that, companies as a whole are coming to online platforms to raise money more nowadays as they see what's going on in the traditional markets, and we'll see more of that. So, for example, we kind of did a look back at what happens historically during recessions to find out, what's going to happen for seed to Series B stage companies, which is the kind of field that we play in. And we found that while, in the 2008 and 2001 recession, there was an initial period of buoyancy in kind of traditional VC markets. After a while, VC investment started to drop off. Longer times between deals, lower valuations, investors just taking a lot longer to do deals because they have no incentive to put all of their eggs into one basket. I think, in terms of valuation, companies are, are stuck a little bit as well. So I think what's probably going to happen for online capital markets and for Seed Invest is the trend of more and more companies coming to us, as well as more and more investors coming to us, is just going to perpetuate. So it's a really exciting time. A lot of it's being driven by uptake in Regulation A+, which I know we'll probably get a chance to discuss later. And as the market starts to adjust to, these new regulations, or relatively new regulations, and they start to really get to, crossing the chasm, as it were, I think we're at a really opportune moment for online capital markets.
Great. I'd love to go to Marc. Marc, you are known throughout the world as a person who has extraordinary connections with international investors. And you have brought numerous deals to these investors, and the investors have invested in your deals, and you are an expert in private equity as well as online capital markets. So could you tell us what's happening in the private equity world? Is everybody got their fingers burned and they're not doing anything? And if so, what are you doing to compensate for that?
Well, it's a very interesting question, Gene, because in fact, we see all kinds of reactions. Some of my clients come to me and say, you know what, I'll now buy companies at a discount. I'll take advantage of the moment that they are close to bankruptcy or they are bankrupted, and I'm going to be greedy and I'm going to catch the opportunity. Some of us are completely frozen. Frozen is the right word. But what I can see is this, over time, if you think about it, one of the mottos that has been live for the last 3 or 4 centuries is the Rothschild motto. Rothschild used to say, buy at the sound of the cannon and sell at the sound of the trumpet. And I think that
buy when blood is in the streets.
Yes, and so I really think that now is the time to invest. And of course, everybody is scared. Of course, everybody wonders if they are going to need their cash, if they are too small. But I think an investor or somebody of a certain size shouldn't be worried about that. I think investors are in the market for times like this. In fact, I can remember back in the 80s, people telling me, I wish I had been part of the crisis in the 70s, because if I had been in the crisis of the 70s, I would probably have made a lot of money today. And my reply was always the same. It's always the same comment is, I wish you had made a lot of money, but I'm afraid that you would have been afraid. And I think that we talk about the problem of the coronavirus, but I'm not really sure that's the main problem. I'm sorry to say. I mean, I know that when I talk like that, I sound like a conspiracy theorist, which I'm not. But I think that our reaction to the coronavirus is the biggest problem. It's not about, like, I'm just giving a few examples to be very concrete. What is your risk to be sitting with people who have been tested negative? Your risk is zero, unless they have been in the meantime exposed to people who basically were positive. So why don't you keep on meeting those people? Why don't, why as friends or as member of one single office, just say, well, this morning, let's go all tested, give a little bit of a blood test or whatever the test is, depending on the country. And, check that we are not. And then we work normally. And I think that the reaction that has been chosen, and I'm not discussing whether it's good or not to be in confinement, that was for me a great rest that I needed for a long time. But I can understand that for some people, it can be a big problem. And I don't want to monopolize the word on this conference, but I just want to say, to conclude, that it's a real perception that I have that all reaction to the coronavirus, will keep on being the key factor. And I like this American success stories word that says, your attitude determines your altitude.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you, Marc. Now, Jason, you could easily replace the word crowdfunding with marketing. And I don't know how we go to Jason. Is that something Sydney does? Sydney, are you the director here that makes Jason appear on the screen? Is that how that works, or do I click on it?
You should be able to hear me right now.
Okay, yeah, we hear you, but I just didn't see your picture there for a minute. Jason, we could easily replace crowdfunding with marketing, because that's really what it is. And you are one of the foremost marketers in the world for crowdfunding offerings. So what is your opinion on this lack of, or this success rates now of crowdfunding, even in the time of coronavirus? Because I know so many people are saying, wait a minute, we're not in the toilet. Everything's going great here. Why do you think that is?
Good question. Yes, we get approached by issuers about fundraising. We tell them our approach for marketing, and I've been in business consulting for many years. Countless business plans have always gravitated towards the marketing section for these reasons, because we are at the front lines of performance. We're creating a funnel and then driving prospective investors through various traffic sources down that funnel, retargeting them, having that repeat exposure mid to low funnel in their whole user experience. I mean, we're seeing 7 touch points or more required to get an investment. So to not have a full marketing strategy walking into one of these capital raises, to not have a firm perspective on the analytics of each stage of that user experience throughout the marketing process, has you operating in the dark to some extent. And, furthermore, if you can raise funds from one private investor offline in one deal, you're going to save yourself a whole lot of resources in terms of time, monetary efforts, and just overall intensity, stress, if you will. I've heard people say crowdfunding's the busiest month of their life, the busiest year of their life, because of the type of relationships you're trying to bring to the offering on a daily basis, the approach towards nurturing those all the way through the process. One of the big value components of equity crowdfunding versus a more traditional route is the marketing aspect. So being able to build an initial brand presence in some cases for the brands that we work with, being able to convey what they're doing on the B2B side, but for more retail investors to get a firm understanding of the company, the direction, the overall offering and potential value towards them, is tremendous tremendous marketing opportunity, and we see it live beyond the fundraise itself. We've worked with some issuers on 3 rounds at this point, a D, a CF, an A, and being able to watch their investor base, which is ultimately a group of ambassadors. You know, some of the groups we've worked with, one that we have published case studies around is Rayton Solar. They actually fit into a category of where we've done multiple rounds, and you know, they're upwards of 10 million in funding at this point, over 4,000 investors. And again, those individuals are performing peer-to-peer marketing. They're sharing with their friends, they're sharing with their family. The moment that their technology is released, even given that it will be B2B, they're going to be pushing for it. They're going to be talking about it. There are all types of different utilities on taking out this mass crowd to produce your capital versus other types of vehicles. And also want to compliment Sam and Marc on what they're saying. Marc, I use this quote all the time of 10% of life is what actually happens. 90% is how we react to it. So really appreciated your coronavirus note commentary there. I'm actually going to be quoting you on that on a couple client calls today, because it is important how brands react. It is important to look at a company as a living, breathing thing at a board meeting, and therefore how it's displayed to the public, whether it's for a KPI, a campaign initiative driven towards equity crowdfunding. And Sam, love how you talked about what's being done today in terms of equity crowdfunding and why it's an attractive route, because we're seeing so many VCs, different types of investment banks and capital groups, angel investors as well, not take meetings, hesitant to deploy capital. So the quality of deals that we're watching gravitate towards the portals, and I know many of their portals are reporting their best month ever, is really remarkable to watch. And you know, I'm trying to take in as much as possible, because this is all emerging. We're seeing some of the top thought leaders, including Shark Tank investors. I think they're on my advertisements every day now for a different type of offering, various types of entrepreneur and finance publishers, influencers, thought leaders talking about equity crowdfunding. I've been waiting for this type of awareness around it. I think it's happening. Extremely unfortunate the circumstance, but I think the role it could play for seed capital for A rounds is going to be realized right now. We're all part of this, and I invite anyone you know, of the participants to ask us questions around it, because the timing is very relevant.
I'd like to go to Marc, if you could hold one second, Sam. Marc, you work with some huge international financiers, investors, very well-heeled heads of banks and things like that. How do they feel about crowdfunding? Because I know, you know, crowdfunding is traditionally people putting in a few $100s, and little small investors online putting a few $100s. What do some of your clients and some of your investors feel about this world of crowdfunding?
Well, first of all, I would say that there is a general perception as which the crowdfunding is a little guy's investment world. That's for sure. So, you know, a lot of people look down on crowdfunding. Personally, I have a different view. I believe that crowdfunding can be a very useful tool to basically push the big investors to move in. A lot of big investors say, only deal with us. And by the way, I think it's Sam that was earlier saying, and I apologize if I'm mistaken about who said that, but I think Sam said in the beginning that it was saving a lot of time and effort, you know, to go to one investor versus, you know, to go to a crowd. And let me tell you that I strongly disagree with that. I believe that investors have a very strange mentality, strange mindset. You know, they basically like to see each other. You go in, so I go in, but if you don't go in, I don't go in, right? So the great thing about crowdfunding is first, isolate each ship from the herd. You know, it's basically you're behind your screen, and you know you don't share your fears with everybody else. But the great thing about crowdfunding is that it should be should not be only a one recipe. It should be a way to basically go, in the next step. For example, make a crowdfunding operation and then, have all the investors meet, physically, as we do in a shareholders meeting, as we do in many occasions. And I think that this is what creates a community. This is also what creates a common action, a common support to the company, a common belief in the values of the company, if any, a common thought and a common appraisal. And I believe that they need to see each other. And I think that, I had invented, let me just, and then I'll give Jason's word because I really feel bad in talking too much with my French accent. But it's really a strange thing. I have invented a system called the incremental price. That system was basically made to avoid the various rounds of financing, because the problem was that at each round of financing, people were rediscussing the valuation. So some thought, oh, we have invested first, and then now the price should be higher because there is less risk. And others people were said, well, first money has been wasted and it is no longer here. So if we don't invest, you should go bankrupt. So why don't you lower the price? And it was a big discussion. So I invented a system that I ran that took 5 years to go through the SEC. That basically was a system that said, in the first prospectus, in the first memorandum, we disclose what the increase of the price will be. So the first 100,000 shares will be at $1. The second 100,000 shares are going to be at $2, and so on. So people knew that, the price would go up. It was like a sure thing that if the number of shares was sold, then, they would have the value of their share increase. The result of that was a lot of shareholders were the biggest salespeople to basically help the company raise the money. And I believe that it has brought even a lot of large investors, and I'm not talking about small investors here, a lot of large investors were sensitive to that incremental price. And I've written an article about it that you can find easily on the web. But I really think that it's a key element to have investors seeing other investors. And sometimes the mere fact that the guy throws $1,000 or $2,000, $5,000 in a deal, several times for me it has triggered a multi-million-dollar investment. Because I said to an investor, if you don't want me to take those few bucks, then you've got to write the check today. And what they are often missing is a deadline. Sorry, Jason.
Mm-hmm. No, I would like to go to Sam because, Sam, the importance of early investors in a deal, whether it's Reg CF or Reg A. So would you talk a little bit about that? I mean, you need a foothold, or you need a main investor to come in first. As we talked the other day with one of my clients, you've got to have something somebody's got to put up something to get going, right?
A cornerstone. Yeah. Also, first, before I kind of go deep into that, I just want to reflect something that Marc mentioned. Marc, you're French. You're from Europe, as you can probably tell. I'm not from the US myself. And I think, crowdfunding laws in the European Union, in the UK especially, have been somewhat ahead of that of the US. And it's interesting to see some of the innovative approaches that you guys have taken over that side of the pond, slowly, coming over here, as well as the regulation. So what you were just mentioning about this kind of increase in price is something that we at Seedinvest started to implement in some of our rounds a couple of years ago, or maybe a year or so ago. We call it Swift financing. And it's just simply the idea that, you're incentivized to invest earlier on. It's very hard, as we all know, to get the first check into a deal. It's very easy comparatively to get the last check into a deal. And crowdfunding, being a public type of fundraising as it is, really just kind of lays that all bare. But it's the nature of fundraising as it has been for a very long time as well. So it is very important for us when we're putting together a deal to have someone cornerstoning the round, or at least representing that they may cornerstone the round. That's not to say that we haven't run, fundraisers where we've had no one in the deal to begin with. One of our most successful Reg CF deals, we actually do Reg CF and Reg B together. We're a licensed broker dealer, so we can do a lot of different things. Raised, $2.5 million with nothing in the door. So it is possible. And I think ad dollars and marketing, as you know well, Gene and Jason, tend to have a strong effect as well. But having a cornerstone institution or a lead of some kind can be helpful. Now, I want to just take a step back from that as well and reflect on another point that Marc intelligently made, which is about the kind of types of investors that we see coming into crowdfunding and the regard for crowdfunding. I personally, before I got to Seed Invest, come from the private equity world and was kind of on the institutional side to begin with. And before I joined Seed Invest, my thoughts around crowdfunding were similarly not so glowing as many institutional investors. But I have found that over the last several years, as crowdfunding has become more accepted, that more and more institutional investors are willing to participate. At Seed Invest, we regularly work with well-known Silicon Valley VC investors, and we're starting to see through Regulation A and the different ways that can be used. Wall Street type investors also participate, private equity and so on as well. I think again that's partly to do with the fact that it takes time for things to come through, but we're starting to see more and more of these investors participate in deals, and I think that's really exciting because of the acceptance across the fundraising spectrum, but also because it gives you that opportunity to bring these guys into a crowdfunding deal and really have part of it is institutional capital, maybe part of it family office, larger high net worth individual investors. We have about 50,000 of those on the Seed Invest platform, and then the rest is kind of the crowd. And it really, I think crowdfunding is evolving not just to crowdfunding, which is this side of the platform, but digital capital markets and online fundraising for each type of investor. And that's, it's very exciting.
Yeah, Jason, irrespective of the large investors that might come into a deal, really to get an offering to be fully subscribed, I think you have to have a marketing campaign. And you and I have discussed that for every dollar you spend, you get a certain amount of money invested. You want to talk about how ad dollars are spent and the results of some of those?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a number thrown around industry-wide of about 10%. And what that means is, on average, every deal is going to perform differently. If everything's working, the click-through rate of your advertisements, of your organic content marketing, the conversion rate on your offering page on a platform like Seed Invest or Start Engine, WeFunder, Public Microventures, what have you, it's typically sitting somewhere around there. So for a current Reg CF offering of 1.07 million, if you're spending around 100K, that may be outside of service fees, that may be just focused on media, you're generally at a good place. And what that means is, if you're seeing an average investment, we see average investments, again, this is taking in the small minimum investors, as well as some of the individuals groups putting 5, 10, 20, what have you, thousand in. We're generally seeing an average somewhere between $750 and $2,500. I like to call it $1,500. Some of our bigger campaigns have been around $1,250, $1,750, so I like to call it $1,500. If we're acquiring that investor around $150, which is very obtainable with Facebook advertising, which is a top driver. It's a focal point not only of equity crowdfunding, from what I've seen from the portals, as well as digital advertising, digital marketing as a whole. If we're driving audiences there, and I can give you all the metrics in the algorithm, from a 1% click-through rate, a 2% conversion rate, if we're averaging all of our A/B tests, all the different audiences we're bringing, which may include historical, seed investors, historical equity crowdfunding investors we've seen participate at all portals, some of the individuals I imagine Marc talks to on a daily basis that we have email lists for and we upload to target directly with ads. If we're bringing all of those different people to an offering, looking at performance from each of those comparatively, optimizing to just which ones are working best, our whole process, if we're spending $150 on average, producing $1,500 on average, and we're able to scale that, and that's why advertising has been so effective as utility to these different platforms, because if we see something working one day, if we see something working one week at a 10x return on ad spend, we could systematically scale it and run it at 2x the following day, the following week, and look at that pacing. Let it settle for the appropriate amount of time, 3 to 7 days, and then provide opportunities to clients to scale it again and again and again. And that's where those marketing spends come to fruition. We're not generally presented an entire budget of, here's 10% of what we're trying to raise, go off to the races. We're usually seeing groups start at a smaller level than that, see performance, scale it, the analytics make that possible. So that's why we've gravitated towards that among all of the tactics that we're using. It works best with the strong content marketing funnel, which includes social, email, digital PR influencers. It works great using LinkedIn and other types of direct outreach. I definitely, by the way, agree with Marc. Thanks for adding that to my comment earlier. Was just mentioning not all groups have that available to even close it out with a single investor. And you have to understand, the groups that I speak with on a daily basis aren't all hitting their goals when they're first talking to us. I'm usually speaking with groups that are having a hard time getting money offline. They're then seeing a plateau in performance on these equity crowdfunding portals, and they're looking to get the right people to their offering however that they can. And as you could tell by my advertising management process, there's a lot to this stuff, and it's not black and white of, hey, go on a portal, spend this much, you're going to hit your goal. Success rates
still aren't there yet. You do a lot of testing too, yeah. And
the success rates are there at lower rounds, over lower rates, but for the full Reg CF cap, and particularly once it expands here, it's not that simple of do this, do that. There is a element of
experimenting.
Absolutely, if not failure. Yeah. So I try to prepare groups, and we're showing a strong return for what they're spending in marketing as a whole. But the difference from the ones that do their filing launch and the ones that hit their full gap, there is a big space in between.
I got a question for Sam. Sam, if I want to do a Reg CF, do I need to come up, and I'm anticipating a 10% spend on advertising, do I need to write a check for $100,000 up front, or can I take some of the money as it comes in and use that for future marketing? You want to talk about how that might work?
Yeah, that's a good question. And Marc, I know that you had something to say. I apologize if I'm taking your spot here, but long story short, it kind of depends on the company and the platform. I think with Seed Invest, there's some deals where we will encourage ad spend for Reg CF. I think we encourage it for all Reg A Plus because of the size of the fundraise as well. For Reg CF, we operate it slightly differently to Reg A Plus. Reg CF, we run for about 6 weeks. And so, if you're going to spend marketing dollars, you need to have it up front. For Reg A Plus, we close on a fortnightly basis once the company has reached their minimum target. And so companies can redeploy some of their marketing dollars, redeploy some of their fundraised into marketing spend, which is, I think, very helpful in allaying some of the costs of Reg A. I know that one of the big concerns for a lot of investors is, how much is this going to cost me? Seed Invest, we're a licensed broker dealer. We can take success-based compensation. So all of our compensation comes at the back, but there are monies that need to be spent on preparing the audit, preparing the Form 1A, and on marketing. But you can kind of reduce some of that upfront expense on marketing, which is a really key expense for driving success in these raises, by using the rolling closes to redeploy into your fundraise. And that also helps you think about, and Jason, you were just talking about this, it helps you really think about optimizing your fundraise, spending at the right times, investing in the right areas, rather than just having a big slug of capital that you're sitting on and thinking, do I need to spend this or not?
Okay, I got a question about that, and Marc, we'll get to you 1 second, but regarding the rolling closes, and rolling closes, in case anyone's watching doesn't know what that is, means you can take money in tranches as they come in. are you telling me that with a Reg CF, most of the people are really needing money versus Reg A, they've already got some money usually because it's a pretty expensive undertaking. But in a Reg CF, I have to come up with 100 grand if I want $1 million, or will you let me take it in tranches like with the Reg A?
So first things first, Jason, I totally kind of respect the data that you're collecting with regards to how much you want to spend on a Reg CF or a Reg A plus, and how much that gets you. I think it differs for different companies. So it's not necessarily always 100K for $1 million on our platform, for example. We don't currently do rolling closes for Reg CF just because it's a 6-week offering, right? It kind of just doesn't really make sense. In certain circumstances, would we consider it? Perhaps, but I think we try to set up a company to succeed. Our platform is, by the way, kind of it's worth mentioning, is a vetted platform. So unlike other services which have a different model, which is totally respectable, we're not just a listing service. We're vetting the companies and deciding which ones we want to work with, and then helping set the company up and giving them some advisory in the first place to actually go out and fundraise. We provide that kind of active partnership mentality. So we do see traditionally slightly higher success rates than other platforms because of that. It also works for us because part of our compensation is taken by taking equity or notes in the company, because we think we should be aligned with the clients we're working with. We try to set up those companies to succeed with or without marketing. Of course, marketing is important. Of course, in certain circumstances, if they really needed capital and they needed to do rolling closes and it was a really important deal, we'd consider it. But for the most part, we don't. For Reg CF.
Marc, you had a comment?
Yeah, I wanted to basically get you out of your, I would say, get you out of your comfortable seat of a moderator, because I know that despite your humility, you're a top expert in marketing and you're just interviewing us, but I think that we should be interviewing you about marketing as well.
I agree with that.
Let me say this.
Yes.
One of the things that you can see on our website is that we help craft the story, help craft the investment story. And that's really what makes the marketing successful. Creating the content, we're known for video. We've won awards from Clio, the New York Festival, multiple Telly awards. I was a TV commercial for many years, and I was allowed to make a story in 30 seconds. If you want to learn how to make a story and condense things, you should know how to do it in 30 seconds. So creating the story and the content is what we are more known for. And then we would turn that over to Jason and Sam and Marc to bring in some big investors. But that's what we really do. We will help someone craft their story and make their investment attractive. I'm sure Jason can tell you that you could take the same deal and tell it 2 different ways, and one would work and one would not work. As a matter of fact, you probably do that in your process. You probably test different things to see what works better and what brings a greater return. And that's why we like working closely with you on anything that we do, because we know you know how to do that too, and you'll tell us if that's a great idea or not. So anyway, that's what we do. We craft the story. We also are known for doing these types of live broadcasts with a huge audience. Our last conferences have gotten over 20,000 live viewers. So we think that's one way to help market, is in the live viewers of a live conference like this. So that's about, thank you. But thank you, Marc. Yes, we like to do a little bit of that. And so, Sam, I'm very interested in the fact that you vet your companies. There was one offering that Jason did recently that got $5.5 million in crowdfunded investments on a Reg A with a $200 million valuation and they were pre-revenue. And I think a lot of that was due to they told their story well and it was marketing well. You want to talk about, Jason, about being able to get a valuation like that and a crowdfunding offering?
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, Sam, I applaud what you guys do at Seed Invest in terms of vetting the deals, and it definitely shows in your success rate. So really glad that you were able to mention that, because it does make a big difference. And Gene, as you were saying, each deal does get a different response. I like to do offline, online comparisons. And if I was out there with a megaphone on the street, particularly during social distancing here, but at any point, people are going to gravitate towards what I'm promoting differently if every minute I'm doing a different company. So same with our marketing. Those metrics I was using before, as Sam mentioned, are definitely an average. We've seen 31x return on ad spend in the past few months on campaigns. We've seen others that are very happy to see a 3x to 5x because of what they needed to complete their round. And, you know, we really try to focus on the marketing side to be fully to give you a clear perspective on the point. When issuers speak with us, they're usually talking to Sam and his team, or similar types of team members at other portals. So they've gone through their audit and already put their valuation together. They've worked with legal, and we're then talking with them about how to get all the right people there. So I'm usually not asked, hey, what should I put my valuation at? I'm usually asked, how do I sell this? How do I get people buying my securities? More than us putting together more of their pro forma and all the numbers associated. That being said, we do like how it removes a lot of that back and forth, and kind of how Marc was talking about earlier. There's no negotiating and tearing apart the valuation. I've been in countless offline meetings. I've been part of successful offline capital raises dating back to 2009 at seven-figure level. So I've seen the whole process, the back and forth offline. And it is nice to see that it's put together. We can then do our job of storytelling, bringing the right people to the offering, bringing them back, supporting them along their user journey, and you know, going to the A/B tests. My whole philosophy towards marketing, particularly the marketing's offerings, I summarize in 3 words, and that's test, optimize, scale. Test, optimize, scale. Test audiences, test messaging, test funnels that they're going down, identify pockets of performance, and scale it. Anything that's underperforming, optimize it, optimize towards the channels they're working. And again, being able to provide the clients opportunities to scale, being able to tell them, hey, here's how we could close out your round and hit your hard cap in the next 2 weeks, makes all of the difference. So that's been our algorithmic approach towards the marketing of these offerings once we're presented with the numbers.
We got 5 minutes left, according to Sydney, maybe 4 minutes now. So if we could close, each of us take a minute. And in that minute, would you also tell people how to get a hold of you and exactly put a plug in for yourself? Who wants to go? Marc, you want to go first?
Fine. So basically, well, you just Google my name, will do it normally. And what I would finish on is really remember that our attitude is our altitude. It's really the key word, I think, in that speech. And I really think that we should pay a lot of attention to what our reaction and what our attitude after this crisis and during this crisis will be.
Mm-hmm. And Sam?
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, look, to get a hold of me, same, search me on Google, or you can email me, samuel@seedinvest.com, and I'm happy to have any conversation with anyone who's interested. You know, as I said, Seed Invest works across the spectrum, Reg D, Reg CF, Reg A+. If you're a company that's looking to fundraise from an alternative capital source to VC, I would encourage you to consider equity crowdfunding, because it's a very powerful method for fundraising and works very well with other sources. I think a lot of people at the moment are finding it tough because they're kind of worried and reflecting on something that Marc said about the state of play now and in the future. If you're a good company, there will be capital available for you somewhere. Digital capital markets, equity crowdfunding allows you to access more of that capital.
Jason, can you give us a close here and tell people how to get a hold of you?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm approachable on LinkedIn. That's probably the best way to find me. I'm most responsive there. Any social channel works, so Jason Fishman, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, whatever your Telegram, whatever your choice is. Also, my company is very responsive, digitalnicheagency.com. We have some case studies on there, everything. Always welcome a warm marketing conversation, regardless of whether we have an opportunity to collaborate. Please feel free to get in contact with us. And second thing, what Sam says, this is a great time to look at equity crowdfunding as a path towards your capital. I would certainly explore it, if not directly do it yourself. And again, don't want to state that too strongly. I'm the marketing side of this. I market once you've chosen to go down this route. But it is amazing to me to see the way this vertical is emerging, particularly while others are, for more or less, getting less traffic and less conversions than they historically have. So, while fundraising and being able to market your brand, looking at the value that that's going to provide you well beyond your actual round, should be very attractive. And again, feel free to reach out to me with any questions. I could share some different insights.
Great. And I'm Gene Massey at MediaShares.com. Gene at MediaShares.com is my email address. I'd love to talk to anybody. We give a free hour to, we charge by the hour, but we give a free hour to anybody at any time if you want some questions answered. I want to thank Sydney for this opportunity today for us to discuss crowdfunding and in this time of virus and how it's still alive and still shining in spite of other types of funding being cut off. I think right now we've got a wonderful time, still have an opportunity to get funding through crowdfunding. And I want to thank you, Sydney, for this opportunity.
Yeah, well, I want to thank you and all the panels, and these are great panels. I appreciate you guys having me with us. Yeah. Look forward to seeing you next time. You guys will be safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Sydney.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
All right, we're going to our next panel here.